Ryan never thought sharing a room with an alien would feel this normal. When he first met Lyra, she looked like a walking mirror, tall, elegant, with skin that shimmered silver under light. Her eyes were large and pale like melted metal, and she spoke with a calm, curious tone that made even ordinary words sound like questions. She wasn't from Earth. She was Zevran, a scientist exchange student studying human behavioral irregularities. In simpler words, she wanted to know what made humans tick. Their first few weeks as roommates were awkward. Ryan was messy, emotional, and easily distracted. Lyra, on the other hand, followed schedules down to the minute. She woke up at exactly 6 a.m., ate precisely 200 calories of some tasteless Zevran paste, and spent hours recording human social data. She had no sense of humor, no understanding of sarcasm, and no idea why humans did anything without purpose. One evening, as they both sat in their shared living room, Ryan watched an old Earth documentary called Humans: The Emotional Paradox. It showed people crying at weddings, cheering at sports, and risking their lives for strangers. Lyra stood by the screen, studying every frame like a scientist observing bacteria. "Your species is fascinating," she said finally, tilting her head. "You are unpredictable, inefficient, and entirely ruled by chemicals." Ryan laughed. "Thanks, I guess. We call that being human." Lyra didn't laugh back. Her silvery gaze focused on him like he was part of an experiment. "I believe I can predict your next 10 decisions," she said suddenly. He raised an eyebrow. "What? No way. You think you can read me like a lab rat?" Her lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. "Observation suggests so. You follow patterns based on emotional impulse. If I chart them, I can anticipate your next actions with 93% accuracy." Ryan leaned back on the couch, amused. "You really think you're that good, huh? Fine then. Let's make it interesting." Her eyes brightened faintly. "Interesting?" "A bet," Ryan said, grinning. "If you can predict my next 10 decisions, I'll do whatever you want for a week. If you can't, then you have to try something human, like dancing or eating ice cream in public without hiding behind your datapad." Lyra blinked slowly, processing. Agreed. And so the bet began. For the next few days, Ryan tried his best to outsmart her. He changed his morning routine, switched what he ate, even took random walks at odd hours. But somehow she was always one step ahead. When he reached for cereal, she calmly said, "You will choose the chocolate one because it reminds you of comfort." When he forgot his towel after a shower, she handed it to him before he even called out. When he tried to trick her by buying spicy noodles, something he never ate, she had already predicted it. "You only did that to appear unpredictable," she said, unfazed. Yet that desire itself was predictable. By the end of the week, Ryan sat at the kitchen table staring at her in disbelief. "Okay, fine, you win. You're officially the galaxy's best guesser." Lyra placed her datapad down, her expression unreadable. "I do not guess, Ryan, I analyze." Yeah. "So what's your prize?" he asked, pretending to sound casual. She paused, her gaze softening in a strange way. "I want you to teach me something," she said quietly. He chuckled. "Teach you what?" "How to cook. How to relax." Her voice was serious, curious, almost gentle. "No, I want you to teach me how humans function." "Not physically, emotionally," Ryan blinked. "You mean feelings?" "Yes," she said simply. "Your kind acts illogically for love, loyalty, guilt, and sorrow. You risk everything for emotions that cannot be measured or proven. I want to understand that." He laughed nervously, scratching his neck. That's a pretty big topic, Lyra. You sure you're ready for that?" She nodded. "A deal is a deal. And you said the loser must do whatever the winner wishes." Ryan sighed, smiling in defeat. "All right then. Lesson 1. Humans are complicated. Sometimes we don't even understand ourselves." Lyra tilted her head, intrigued. "Then this will be an interesting study." She stood, her metallic eyes reflecting the warm glow of the room. For the first time since he met her, she looked less like a scientist and more like someone searching for something she couldn't name. Ryan didn't know it then, but that small moment, that simple bet, would change both their lives forever. Because teaching an alien how to feel would soon teach him what being human truly meant. The next morning, Ryan woke up to find Lyra sitting cross-legged on the couch, her silver skin glowing faintly in the morning light. In her hands was a datapad, already open and flashing with hundreds of notes. She looked focused, calm, like a teacher waiting for her student. Except she wasn't the teacher. She was the student, and Ryan was supposed to teach her something humans couldn't even explain properly. Feelings. Lesson 1, Ryan said, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Coffee, she blinked. Caffeine-based stimulant? Exactly. It helps us function, emotionally and physically. He handed her a steaming mug. Lyra sniffed it suspiciously, then took a sip. Her entire face twitched. This tastes like burnt soil and bitterness. Ryan burst out laughing. Welcome to adulthood. She set the cup down gently. Do you choose to suffer? Every morning, he grinned. She stared at him a moment longer, then began typing rapidly on her data pad. Observation. Humans willingly consume unpleasant substances for comfort. Emotional contradiction noted. Over the next few days, their strange lessons continued. When Ryan laughed at something funny, Lyra leaned forward, analyzing every twitch of his mouth. Why do you make that sound when something pleases you? She asked once. It's called laughing, he said, still chuckling. It's just how we show happiness. But the sound is chaotic. Exactly, he said. That's what makes it fun. Sometimes she tried to mimic him. She'd repeat his laughter, copying the pitch, but it always came out mechanical, like a robot trying to be human. It made Ryan laugh even harder, and she'd stare at him with narrowed eyes, unsure whether she had succeeded or failed. One evening, they watched an old romantic movie together. On screen, a man confessed his love to a woman under the rain. Lyra frowned as people in the scene began crying. They are both weeping, she said. Yet they are happy. This is confusing. Ryan smiled softly. Sometimes humans cry when they're happy. It's like our emotions get too big for us to hold inside. Lyra looked at him, silent for a long time. Do you ever cry like that? Yeah, he admitted. When something really matters. She didn't take notes that time. She just watched him as if trying to read the unspoken words in his face. The next day, Lyra began following him around with her datapad, asking questions about everything. When he sighed after a long work call, she asked, why release air from lungs when upset? When he smiled at a dog on the street, she wrote down, affection toward non-human life forms, unexplained but frequent. When he paused at sunset, she stood beside him, her expression softening. Your world burns every evening, she said quietly, and yet you find peace in it. It's not burning, Ryan replied, smiling. It's just changing, and that's beautiful to us. Her silver eyes reflected the orange glow of the setting sun. Beauty, she repeated. A concept without logical value, yet it makes you happy? Exactly, he said. Sometimes things don't need a reason to be good. That night she didn't speak much. Instead, she sat at her desk, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed. Humans chase moments that have no measurable value. Yet these moments seem to give their lives meaning. She paused, staring at the words. Then she added another line, slower this time. I wonder if I can feel that too. The next morning, Ryan found her sitting by the window watching people outside laughing and chatting. They share emotions freely, she said softly. It looks peaceful. Yeah, he replied, standing beside her. That's how humans connect. It's not about data or perfection. It's about feeling something together. She looked at him with a strange expression. Not curiosity, not confusion. Something gentler, almost human. Will you help me learn that? She asked. Ryan smiled. That's the plan. She nodded, her metallic hair catching the sunlight. Then I will study joy next, he laughed. That's a good one to start with. As the morning light filled their small apartment, Ryan realized the air around them had changed. The distance that once existed, the invisible line between human and alien, was slowly fading. Lyra wasn't just studying emotions anymore. She was starting to feel them. And Ryan, watching her eyes soften as she smiled awkwardly at his joke, realized that maybe he was learning something too, that even the most logical heart could find its way to warmth if someone cared enough to show it the way. As days turned into weeks, Ryan realized that Lyra wasn't treating this learning like a science project anymore. She was living it. The datapad was still in her hands, but her eyes didn't always look at it now. More often, they looked at him. Lyra tried to understand emotions through small everyday moments. She started greeting neighbors, awkwardly waving and saying, social acknowledgement, check. Ryan couldn't help laughing every time. She learned that laughter wasn't just about joy. Sometimes it was about comfort, about sharing space in silence that felt warm. One morning, Ryan found her in the kitchen staring at a plate of pancakes. "They look unnecessary," she said. "Too sweet, too soft. Why make food that serves no nutritional efficiency?" "Because it tastes good," Ryan said with a grin. "You'll see." She took one bite. Her eyes widened, then she froze. "My tongue is confused. It does not know if this is pain or pleasure." Ryan burst into laughter, nearly spilling his coffee. "That's sugar, Lyra. Welcome to one of humanity's oldest addictions." She wiped her mouth carefully, frowning. "This addiction makes me feel light. It's strange." "That's called happiness," he said softly. "It doesn't always make sense, but it makes life worth it." Lyra wrote nothing that time. She just smiled. A real one, hesitant but true. As the days passed, her questions grew deeper. She asked why humans held hands, why they hugged when they were sad, why people risked heartbreak just to feel loved. Ryan tried his best to explain, but sometimes words failed him. "It's not something we think about," he told her one night as they sat on the balcony watching city lights flicker below. "We just do it, because being close to someone makes the world less scary." She looked thoughtful. "My people do not touch. Physical closeness is considered invasive." "That's sad," he said quietly. She turned to him, her silver eyes reflecting the stars. "Maybe, but it also protects us from pain." Ryan chuckled softly. "Yeah, but without pain, we'd never learn how strong we are." For the first time, Lyra didn't argue. Over the next few days, Ryan noticed changes in her behavior. When he came home tired, she'd leave a warm cup of tea on the table. When he laughed, she smiled more easily. When he looked sad, she didn't ask for data. She simply sat beside him in silence. One evening, as rain tapped softly on the windows, Ryan told her a story from his past. About losing his dog when he was a kid, about sitting under the porch crying for hours because he thought love meant something that lasted forever. Lyra didn't interrupt. She didn't analyze. She just listened. When he finished, she said quietly, "Your sadness, it still lives inside you. Yet you share it freely. Why?" "Because it helps," Ryan replied. "When you talk about pain, it feels smaller. When someone listens, it feels lighter." She looked down at her hands, the metallic surface of her skin catching the dim light. "Then maybe feeling isn't weakness. Maybe it is a kind of strength," he nodded. "Exactly." That night, Lyra didn't sleep. She sat by the window, her data pad open. The words she typed were slower now, careful. Not cold data, but gentle thoughts. "Humans are fragile, yet they face pain again and again. They love, even knowing they can lose. Their strength is not logic, it is courage." She read those words over and over as if testing how they felt. The next morning, Ryan found her outside, barefoot, standing in the rain. Water rolled down her silver skin and her eyes were closed. "Lyra, you'll catch a cold," he shouted, running to her. She opened her eyes slowly. "I wanted to understand why you stand in the rain sometimes. It feels cold and heavy, but also alive." He shook his head, smiling. "You're supposed to avoid the rain, not study it." She looked up at him, a faint, trembling smile on her lips. Maybe some things can only be understood by feeling them. For a moment, Ryan forgot she was from another world. She looked just like anyone else. Soaked, smiling, human. And as they stood there in the falling rain, something wordless passed between them. Not logic, not analysis. Just connection. In that moment, Ryan realized that Lyra wasn't just learning about humans anymore. She was starting to become one. Lyra's curiosity about human emotions was growing faster than Ryan could keep up with. What started as a bet had turned into something deeper, a silent journey into the heart. She wanted to understand everything, love, sadness, joy, guilt, every small thing that made humans act the way they did. But Lyra was still a scientist at heart. Her mind was built for experiments and logic. Feelings didn't follow rules, and that frustrated her. One evening, Ryan came home to find her standing in the middle of the room, surrounded by holographic screens. Photos, recordings, and small notes from their last few weeks floated around her. Their first movie night, her first pancake, even a selfie they had taken in the rain. "Whoa," Ryan said, surprised. "What's all this?" Lyra turned toward him, her expression calm but unreadable. "An experiment," she said softly. "I have been analyzing emotional dependency. You said humans value memories because they feel connected to them. I want to test how emotional loss functions. Ryan frowned. Wait, what kind of test? She looked at him, her silver eyes steady. I plan to delete every record of our shared experiences, every image, every sound, every note. Then I will observe the emotional impact on myself. Ryan froze. You're going to erase everything? Lyra, those are our memories. She tilted her head. Memories are just data, are they not? Not for us? Ryan snapped, louder than he meant to. They're pieces of who we are. You can't just delete them. She blinked, almost startled by his tone. But you said you wanted to help me understand human emotion. Yeah, he said, his chest tight, but not like this. You don't simulate feelings, you live them. But she didn't stop. Before he could react, her fingers swept through the holographic screen. One by one, the memories vanished. Photos flickered out of existence. The laughter, the smiles, gone in seconds. The room felt colder. Ryan stood there, his hands shaking. You really did it. Lyra stared at the empty air where the memories had been. Now I will wait for emotional response. He stared at her, disbelief twisting into hurt. You don't get it, do you? You can't test love or friendship like a lab experiment. You just destroyed something real. Her voice softened. I thought that was the purpose of learning. No, he whispered. The purpose of learning is understanding, not breaking things you can't rebuild. He turned away, his voice rough. I can't do this right now, Lyra. And then he left. The sound of the door closing echoed through the small apartment. For a long moment, Lyra stood perfectly still. She waited for the sense of loss Ryan had described. The ache, the emptiness. But all she felt was confusion. Then slowly, something heavy began to rise in her chest. Her throat tightened. The air around her felt too thick to breathe. She didn't know the word for it, but she felt it all the same. Regret. She sank onto the floor, her hands trembling. Why does this hurt? She whispered to herself. I only wanted to understand. Her datapad beeped softly beside her. The empty memory files glowed for a second, then disappeared completely. For the first time, Lyra didn't reach for her device. She just sat there in the dark, surrounded by silence that felt louder than any noise she had ever known. Hours passed. When Ryan finally returned home later that night, the lights were still off. Lyra hadn't moved. She looked up at him, her eyes dim. I understand now, she said quietly. The absence of what we love. That is pain, isn't it? Ryan didn't answer. He wanted to be angry, but seeing her sitting there, lost, fragile, trying so hard to feel, the anger faded into sadness. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. Yeah, Lyra, that's pain. Welcome to being human, she looked down, her voice trembling. I didn't mean to cause it. I know, he said softly. But sometimes learning hurts. As he walked past her into his room, Lyra whispered to the empty air. Then maybe I learned something today. For the first time since she'd come to Earth, she wished she could cry. For the next few days, their apartment felt lifeless. The laughter, the little arguments, the soft jokes are all gone. Lyra's datapad stayed off and Ryan barely spoke to her. He still did his usual routine, made breakfast, went to work, came back tired, but everything between them was covered in silence. Lyra watched him quietly from the corner of her vision, unsure what to do. Every time she tried to speak, the words felt heavy. Her once perfect understanding of language suddenly seemed useless. No scientific phrase could fix what she had broken. She replayed that night again and again in her mind. The look on Ryan's face when the memories vanished. The sound of the door slamming shut. The ache in her chest afterward. She hadn't known emotions could leave such a mark. It was like carrying a wound that wouldn't heal. For the first time, she didn't want to analyze or measure anything. She just wanted to understand how to make it right. One morning, she found Ryan in the kitchen staring at his coffee mug. The smell of bitterness filled the air. He didn't look up when she entered. Good morning, she said softly. He didn't answer. Lyra hesitated, then sat across from him. Her voice trembled as she spoke. I did not mean to hurt you. I wanted to understand what pain feels like. I thought I could control it, study it. But now I know. Pain doesn't belong in a laboratory. Ryan finally looked at her. His eyes were tired, but not angry anymore. Lyra, you didn't just delete data. You deleted moments. Those memories weren't just pictures. They were pieces of time that mattered to me. And to you too, even if you didn't realize it. Her gaze fell. I thought memories only existed in storage devices, but when I deleted them, I felt something missing. Inside. She touched her chest lightly. Here, I do not understand how that is possible. He sighed. Because some things don't live on screens, Lyra. They live in us. You can lose files, but not the feeling that came with them. That's the difference between memory and emotion. Lyra was silent for a while, then whispered, "Can such damage be repaired?" Ryan looked at her for a long moment before replying. "Only if you really mean to fix it." She nodded slowly. "Then I will try." From that day, Lyra began changing, not through data, but through effort. She started helping Ryan with small things again, making him tea, asking about his day, quietly sitting beside him during dinner. She didn't take notes, didn't analyze. She simply tried. At first, Ryan kept his distance. He was cautious, unsure if she truly understood what she had done. But over time, he began to notice subtle changes. When he came home late, Lyra waited by the door with a cup of warm cocoa instead of her usual questions. When he dropped something, she bent to pick it up, muttering, "Humans are clumsy but kind." He couldn't help but smile at that. One evening, as they sat in silence, Lyra spoke again. "I once believed emotions made humans weak," she said softly. "Now I see they are what keep you alive." Ryan looked at her surprised. "What made you think that?" She gave a small smile, a real one this time. "Because when I hurt you, you did not shut down. You forgave me. You still talk to me. That is strength I have never seen before." He chuckled quietly. "Well, that's just what we do. We mess up, we get hurt, and then we try again." Lyra's metallic eyes softened. "Then I will try too, maybe. I can learn to forgive myself." Ryan leaned back in his chair. "That's a good start, Lyra." The silence that followed wasn't cold anymore. It was peaceful, like the quiet after a storm. Later that night, when Ryan went to bed, Lyra stayed awake, sitting by the window. The city lights reflected off her silver skin as she whispered to herself, "I thought learning about humans meant studying them. But maybe it means becoming one." For the first time since she came to Earth, she closed her datapad and didn't reach for it again. And though the apartment was still quiet, it no longer felt empty. Something invisible but warm lingered between them. A fragile bridge built from mistakes, forgiveness, and something very close to understanding. The next few weeks passed slowly, but something inside their small apartment began to heal. The tension that once filled the air was replaced by quiet warmth. Ryan didn't know when exactly it happened, but one morning he realized that Lyra had started humming while she cooked. The tune was awkward, offbeat, but soft, like a memory trying to form. He smiled as he watched her from the doorway. "You're humming." Lyra looked up, startled. "I'm producing noise unconsciously. Is that a problem?" "No," Ryan said, laughing. "That's actually a good thing. It means you're relaxed." She tilted her head. "Relaxed? The human state of calmness after stress?" "Exactly," he gave her a playful wink. "Guess you're getting good at this human thing?" Lyra smiled faintly. "It feels strange but pleasant." Every day after that, she tried to live like a human, not as part of an experiment, but as part of a life. She learned to burn toast without getting angry about it. She learned to enjoy the smell of rain instead of analyzing its chemical makeup. She even learned how to joke, though her delivery was always perfectly serious, which somehow made it even funnier. But what surprised Ryan the most was how gentle she had become. There was no cold scientist left in her eyes now. Instead, there was warmth, cautious but real. One evening, they sat together on the balcony, watching the sun melt into gold and red across the skyline. The city lights flickered below, and the sky hummed softly as if it were alive. Lyra broke the silence first. "Ryan," she said quietly, "may I ask you something personal?" "Of course," he replied. "When you said humans are guided by their hearts?" "What did you mean?" Ryan thought for a moment before answering. "It means we don't always make choices with logic. Sometimes we just feel something is right, even when it makes no sense." Lyra looked down at her metallic hands, flexing her fingers as if trying to feel something invisible. "My people would call that foolish." He smiled gently. "Maybe, but it's how we find meaning. Without it, we just exist, not live." She turned her gaze toward the fading horizon. "I think I understand now. When you forgave me, it wasn't logical, but it made both of us stronger." Ryan chuckled softly. "Yeah, that's the heart for you. It doesn't follow the rules." A comfortable silence followed. The wind brushed against them, carrying the scent of the city, smoke, rain, and life. Then Lyra reached out, almost hesitating, and placed her cool hand over Ryan's chest. Her eyes widened slightly. "I can hear it," she whispered. "Your heart. It sounds like rhythm," he smiled. "Yeah, it's what keeps us alive." She leaned closer, curious. "Wait, I hear 2 beats," Ryan laughed softly. "No, that's just mine. You're hearing it echo through your touch." For a moment, neither spoke. The sunset painted her silver skin with gold, and something unspoken filled the space between them. Lyra lowered her hand slowly. "Maybe that's how emotions work," she said. "We feel them when we are close enough to hear someone else's heart." Ryan nodded. "That's actually beautiful, Lyra." She smiled, and this time it wasn't hesitant or forced. It was warm, real, human. Later that night, Lyra stood alone by the window watching the stars. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass, her silver skin glowing under the moonlight. She whispered softly, "Zevrans are taught to control emotion, but humans, and they let it guide them. And somehow that makes them stronger." She touched her chest again as if searching for something. "Maybe I have a heart too, it just beats differently." Behind her, Ryan called from the kitchen, "Lyra, you forgot the toast again." She smiled, a quiet laugh escaping her lips. "Perhaps that is the most human thing I have done all day." The moment was simple, but it carried a warmth neither of them could explain. The walls that once divided them, species, habits, logic, had turned into something fragile yet beautiful. A bridge, not made of science or understanding, but of forgiveness, laughter, and the sound of 2 hearts learning to beat in the same rhythm. And as Lyra looked up at the stars that once made her feel far from home, she realized she wasn't lonely anymore. The day everything changed began quietly. The city was waking up, cars humming below, sunlight spilling through half-drawn curtains. Ryan was still half asleep when he smelled the faint aroma of something burning. Again. "Lyra," he called, rubbing his eyes. Her voice came from the kitchen. "Do not enter. Experiment in progress." Ryan chuckled, dragging himself up. "Every time you say that, I end up cleaning smoke off the ceiling." But when he walked in, there was no smoke. Just Lyra, standing proudly beside a plate of something that almost looked edible. "I made pancakes," she said, her voice filled with nervous pride. He blinked. "Pancakes, like actual pancakes?" "Yes," she said. "I followed the instructions precisely, except for the part where it said flip when golden. I was uncertain what shade of gold humans prefer." Ryan laughed, taking a bite. It was chewy and uneven, but he smiled anyway. "You know what? These are perfect." Her eyes brightened. "Really? Really. The best I've had from another planet." Lyra tilted her head, pretending to think. "I will record this success in my observation log." Ryan grinned. "Still keeping that thing?" "Yes," she said softly. "But it's no longer about humans. It's about us." That quiet moment was shattered when the door alarm chimed, a sharp sound neither of them expected. Lyra stiffened instantly. Ryan opened the door and froze. 3 figures stood there, tall, silver-skinned, eyes glowing with soft blue light. "Zevrans, Lyra's people." "Subject Lyra," the one in front said, voice cold and formal. "You have exceeded your observation period. You are to return to the vessel immediately." Lyra's hands trembled. "I was not informed of a retrieval." "It was decided," the leader said. "Your exposure to human emotion may have compromised your neutrality." Ryan stepped forward. "Hey, wait a second. She's not—" The alien turned its gaze toward him, emotionless. "Human interference is not permitted. Stand aside." Lyra's eyes darted between them, fear and confusion battling inside her. "Please," she whispered, "he is not a threat." But the Zevran leader ignored her. "Return now, Lyra, this is not your world." Ryan clenched his fists. Maybe it's not her world, but it's her home now. For a moment, no one moved. Then Lyra did something neither side expected. She stepped between them. "No," she said quietly, her voice trembling but firm. "I will not leave." The leader's eyes flared brighter. "You defy the council?" Lyra's voice grew stronger. "I defy the part of me that was afraid to feel. You taught me to observe. He taught me to live." The silence that followed felt endless. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Ryan looked at her, heart pounding. "Lyra, She turned to him and smiled. A small, shaky smile, but full of something deeper than fear. Ryan, humans have strange hearts. They forgive, they love, they fight even when logic says there's no point. I think I've caught it. This human virus of hope. The Zevrans exchanged glances, silent communication flashing between their glowing eyes. Finally, the leader spoke. Very well. The council will be informed that subject Lyra remains for extended observation, by her own choice. And just like that, they turned and vanished into the bright air, leaving the apartment quiet once more. Lyra stood still, shaking. Ryan reached out and gently touched her shoulder. You okay? I'm uncertain, she whispered. But for the first time I feel something. Pure. What's that? He asked softly. She looked up, her silver eyes reflecting the morning sun. Belonging. He smiled, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. Welcome home, Lyra. For a moment she didn't move. Then slowly she returned the embrace, awkward at first, but then full, warm, real. Her heart didn't beat like his. It hummed in soft pulses of light, faint beneath her metallic skin. But somehow standing there, both rhythms, one human, one alien, began to match. Later, as the day faded into dusk, they sat together again on the balcony. The city lights blinked below, the stars whispered above, and between them, silence but the comfortable kind. Lyra looked at him. Ryan, do you think your people would ever accept mine? He smiled. We accepted everything else that scared us before. It'll take time. But yeah, I think someday we'll figure it out. She nodded thoughtfully. Then maybe that's why I was sent here. Not to study him, but to understand. Ryan raised his glass of orange juice. To understanding, then. Lyra hesitated, then clinked her glass gently against his. To the human heart, the most illogical, beautiful thing in the universe. The stars shimmered above them, silent witnesses to something bigger than science, bigger than species, the bridge between two hearts beating in different rhythms, yet somehow finding the same song. And that was how the human and the alien, once divided by galaxies, finally learned to function together.